me! Please, you have to listen. I said, let's go, not what you think. How dare you speak to me like that?
Ma'am, I was only following orders.
I don't care, you're fired.
That's not your decision.
Everyone trembled before the Billionaire's Fiancée, until the new Maid changed everything. Esteemed viewers, welcome to luxurious true life stories. Please like and subscribe for more captivating luxury true stories. Let's get into the story. Daniel Patrick was not born into tenderness. He was shaped by discipline, pressure, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. Long before his name became synonymous with power, he learned early that stability was earned, not given. His world revolved around structure, early mornings, calculated risks, and an unspoken vow never to be vulnerable again. Wealth came quickly, but warmth never followed. The higher he climbed, the quieter his life became, until silence felt permanent. By the time Daniel became a billionaire, his days were perfectly controlled and emotionally barren. Meetings replaced friendships. Contracts replaced trust. People respected him, feared him, but never truly knew him. His massive estate was not a home, it was a fortress built to protect a man who had long stopped believing in comfort. Every decision he made was logical, every relationship strategic. What Daniel did not know was that his carefully ordered life was already on the brink of disruption. Not from the boardroom, not from rivals, but from a future he had never planned for. Somewhere beyond his world of power and precision, a quiet change was beginning, one that would test everything he believed about control, fear, and love. Rita Donald learned endurance before she learned hope. Her life had never been defined by choice, only necessity. Every morning began with the same calculation: what could be sacrificed today so tomorrow could still exist? She lived quietly, not because she lacked a voice, but because the world had never paused long enough to hear it. Poverty hardened her hands but softened her heart, teaching her empathy instead of bitterness. Despite her struggles, Rita carried herself with dignity that poverty could not erase. She found comfort in small routines, cleaning spaces until they felt lighter, humming softly while working, dreaming of a life where fear was not the currency of survival. She believed that character mattered more than status, even though life had given her no proof that kindness was rewarded. When the opportunity to work as a maid at an elite estate appeared, Rita did not see luxury, she saw stability. She accepted without expectations, unaware that this single decision would pull her into a world ruled by power, fear, and secrets. She stepped forward not knowing she was walking toward the very place where her quiet strength would be tested, and where it would begin to matter. The estate Daniel Patrick owned did not feel like a home. It felt like a system that demanded obedience. Every hallway echoed with restraint, every polished surface reflected unspoken rules. The staff moved with precision, careful not to draw attention, careful not to make mistakes that could cost them their jobs, or worse, their dignity. Conversations were brief, eyes were lowered, and laughter was rare. Rita noticed it immediately on her first full day. The house was immaculate, yet heavy, as though fear itself lived in the walls. Senior staff spoke in coded warnings, advising her to be invisible, to never ask questions, and most importantly, to never cross the woman who ruled the estate when Daniel was absent. Her name was spoken softly, almost like a curse: Elena Nathan. As Rita adjusted to her duties, she sensed that this mansion was not governed by kindness or fairness, but by dominance. Still, she did her work with care, refusing to let the environment harden her spirit. Unknowingly, her presence alone, calm, respectful, unafraid, had already begun to disturb the fragile balance of fear that held the house together. Elena Nathan did not enter rooms quietly, she claimed them. Her presence carried authority sharpened by cruelty, and the staff felt it long before she spoke. She believed power was proven through fear, and fear was something she distributed freely. Every command was edged with humiliation, every correction designed to remind others of their place beneath her. Her background had taught her that weakness was unforgivable. Elena surrounded herself with luxury not for comfort, but for validation. Being Daniel Patrick's fiancée was not about love, it was about status, control, and the security of standing beside a man whose wealth amplified her influence. She measured people by usefulness and discarded them emotionally the moment they disappointed her. To Elena, the mansion was her domain. Staff existed to serve, not to think. Any sign of independence offended her sense of superiority. She ruled through intimidation, unaware that fear was a fragile foundation. And deep within her carefully curated life, secrets lingered, secrets that would one day turn her own weapons against her. Daniel's engagement to Elena Nathan looked flawless to the outside world. They appeared polished together, wealth, beauty, influence perfectly aligned. Yet behind closed doors, their relationship lacked warmth, laughter, or genuine connection. Conversations revolved around appearances, schedules, and expectations. Elena demanded attention. Daniel provided obligation. Love was never discussed because it had never been present. Daniel had convinced himself that stability mattered more than emotion. Elena fit into his life the way a well-negotiated contract did, efficient, beneficial, and socially impressive. Still, a quiet discomfort followed him. He often found himself retreating into work to avoid the growing tension that surfaced whenever Elena tried to assert control over decisions that mattered to him. Elena, however, believed the engagement sealed her dominance. She treated the estate as proof of her future authority, tightening her grip on everyone within it. What neither of them realized was that their carefully maintained arrangement was already fragile. And into that fragile space, a new presence was slowly stepping closer to the center of their lives. Rita Donald's official arrival as part of the mansion's permanent staff went unnoticed by most, and that suited her. She worked quietly, observing everything while drawing little attention to herself. She learned quickly where she was allowed to walk, when to speak, and when silence was safer. The house had rhythms, and she adapted without resistance. Yet something about Rita unsettled the unspoken order. She did not rush in fear when Elena appeared, nor did she shrink under sharp words. She responded with calm respect, never defensive, never submissive. Other staff members noticed. Some worried she was too bold without realizing it. Others felt a strange sense of relief just watching her move through the halls without panic. Rita was not trying to challenge anyone. She simply believed dignity should not depend on position. That belief guided her hands as she worked and steadied her voice when addressed. Unknowingly, her quiet presence was already altering the atmosphere of the estate, one composed breath at a time. Daniel Patrick noticed Rita Donald by accident. It was not her appearance that caught his attention, but the absence of tension around her. In a house where everyone stiffened in his presence, she simply acknowledged him with calm professionalism. No nervous stammering. No exaggerated politeness. Just respect. It was unfamiliar, and unexpectedly grounding. Their first exchange was brief and ordinary, yet it lingered with him long after. Rita spoke carefully, choosing her words not out of fear, but consideration. Daniel sensed something he had not felt in a long time: ease. For once, he did not feel like a title or a figure of authority. He felt like a man being addressed as a human being. Rita, for her part, saw past the wealth. She noticed Daniel's tired eyes and controlled posture, signs of someone carrying too much alone. She did not pity him, nor did she romanticize him. She simply acknowledged his presence. That simple moment planted the earliest seed of change, one neither of them recognized yet. Elena sensed disruption before she could name it. Power made her alert to shifts in attention, and Rita's quiet composure unsettled her. She summoned the new maid under the guise of correction, her tone sharp, her words deliberately demeaning. Staff nearby lowered their heads, expecting the usual outcome: fear, apology, submission. Rita listened without interruption. When she responded, her voice was steady, her words respectful but firm. She accepted responsibility where necessary, yet refused to absorb humiliation. There was no challenge in her tone, only self-respect. The moment stretched longer than expected. Elena felt it, the loss of absolute control, however small. Though Elena dismissed her, irritation followed. Rita's calm lingered like defiance without rebellion. The staff whispered later, stunned. For the first time, someone had stood before Elena without crumbling. Elena did not yet see Rita as a threat, but she remembered her. And that memory would not fade easily. Daniel began to notice subtle changes within his home. The atmosphere, once rigid and heavy, felt different, quieter, but lighter. He could not trace it to a specific event, only to a presence. Rita's consistency, her respectful confidence, began to stand out against the background of tension he had grown used to ignoring. Their interactions became slightly longer, still professional, yet increasingly meaningful. Rita listened without judgment when Daniel spoke casually about work or the pressures of responsibility. She never offered advice unless asked, never pushed boundaries. Her strength was in restraint. Daniel found himself speaking more freely around her than he ever had around Elena. For the first time in years, Daniel felt seen without being evaluated. It unsettled him. Emotional vulnerability was not something he welcomed, yet Rita's presence made it unavoidable. Something was shifting inside him, an awareness that fear was not the same as respect, and control was not the same as peace. Clinton entered the story quietly, the way danger often does. To the outside world, he was polished, articulate, and charming, someone who fit effortlessly into elite spaces without ever appearing desperate to belong. He was introduced to the mansion under the pretense of business connections and social familiarity, a man who seemed useful, harmless, and well-placed. No one questioned his presence because Elena welcomed him with an ease she showed to very few people. What the staff did not see were the private moments, the subtle glances, the carefully timed absences, the conversations that stopped the instant footsteps approached. Clinton was not merely a visitor, he was a secret Elena guarded fiercely. Their relationship thrived on deception and thrill. Where Daniel represented status and permanence, Clinton represented desire, recklessness, and validation. Elena enjoyed having both worlds, believing herself clever enough to control them without consequence. Rita noticed Clinton not because she was suspicious, but because she was observant. She saw how Elena's voice softened around him, how her cruelty momentarily disappeared, how her eyes followed him when she believed no one was watching. Rita said nothing. She asked no questions. But a quiet unease settled in her chest. She had learned long ago that secrets carried weight, and in a house already built on fear, secrets like these never stayed buried forever. The day fear fully revealed its power inside the mansion arrived without warning. Elena was already restless that morning, her patience worn thin by unseen anxieties. Her voice carried sharper edges, her commands more punishing than usual. Staff moved faster, breathed shallower, knowing that any misstep would be met with public humiliation. The house felt brittle, like something ready to crack. When a minor mistake occurred in the dining hall, Elena seized the moment. She made an example of it, her words cutting, deliberate, meant to remind everyone who ruled when Daniel was absent. No one intervened. No one dared to meet her eyes. Fear worked exactly as Elena intended. It froze people in place, stripped them of courage, and reinforced her dominance. Rita stood nearby, heart pounding, but she did not look away. She did not speak out of turn, nor did she challenge Elena directly. Instead, when the moment passed, she quietly corrected the situation with care and dignity, restoring order without feeding the cruelty. It was small, almost invisible, but the staff noticed. For the first time, fear did not have the final word. The shift inside the mansion did not happen loudly. There were no confrontations, no declarations of rebellion, no sudden changes in authority. Instead, it moved quietly through the routines, through how people breathed, how they spoke to one another when Elena was not present, how they stood a little straighter knowing someone else saw them as human. That someone was Rita. Rita never positioned herself as a savior. She continued her work with the same humility and discipline, yet her influence grew in ways she never intended. When staff made mistakes, she helped them quietly instead of blaming them. When fear tightened their voices, she listened. When Elena's cruelty lingered in the air long after she left a room, Rita restored calm simply by being present. Her kindness did not erase fear, but it weakened its hold. Daniel observed these changes slowly, almost unconsciously. The mansion felt less hostile, less cold. He noticed staff responding with something other than terror, respect, loyalty, relief. And at the center of it all was Rita, a woman with no power except integrity. For the first time, Daniel began to question everything he had allowed to exist in his home, and everything he had mistaken for strength. As days passed, Daniel became increasingly aware of how often his thoughts returned to Rita. Not in ways that crossed boundaries, but in moments of reflection, when decisions weighed heavily on him, or when the house felt unusually peaceful. Her presence had become a constant, steady point in a life defined by control and distance. That realization unsettled him more than any confrontation could have. Rita, too, felt the tension of something unspoken. She was careful with her words, her posture, her emotions. She respected the line between employer and employee, between possibility and propriety. Yet she could not deny the warmth she felt when Daniel spoke to her with sincerity instead of command. It was not desire that frightened her, it was the potential for change in a world that punished vulnerability. Elena noticed the distance growing between herself and Daniel. She could feel attention slipping, control loosening. Her instincts sharpened. She watched Rita more closely now, searching for weakness, waiting for a mistake. What she did not realize was that the most dangerous shifts happen quietly, when people stop fearing you and start seeing you clearly. The discovery did not come through spying or suspicion. It came through coincidence, the kind that alters lives without warning. Rita had been assigned to a rarely used wing of the estate, a place reserved for guests who came and left quietly. The corridors there carried a different stillness, heavier, more secretive. As she worked, voices drifted through a partially closed door, low and intimate, unmistakably Elena's. Rita froze, not out of curiosity but instinct. She intended to leave, to respect privacy, until she heard Clinton's voice respond, familiar, confident, far too close. The conversation was not subtle. There was no room for misinterpretation. Words of affection, frustration, and secrecy spilled freely, revealing a relationship built on deception and entitlement. Rita felt the weight of it settle into her chest, heavy and dangerous. She walked away without confronting anyone, her hands trembling despite her composure. What she carried now was not gossip, it was truth, and truth had consequences. Rita understood immediately that knowing this placed her at risk. Yet she also knew that silence would allow cruelty to continue unchecked. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, fear tested her resolve directly. Rita did not sleep that night. Knowledge had changed the way the mansion felt around her, turning familiar corridors into narrow passages lined with risk. She moved through her duties the next day with the same outward calm, but inside, every sound seemed louder, every glance heavier. She avoided Elena as much as possible, not out of fear, but strategy. Truth, she understood, required timing. Elena sensed the shift almost immediately. She had always been skilled at reading threats, and something about Rita's restraint felt deliberate now. Her tone grew colder, her commands sharper, as if pressure alone could force obedience. She tested Rita with unreasonable tasks and veiled warnings, trying to provoke a reaction that never came. Rita endured quietly, refusing to give Elena the satisfaction of fear. Daniel noticed the strain. Rita's composure remained intact, but her silence carried weight. He sensed something was wrong, something beyond exhaustion or routine conflict. For the first time, he questioned Elena's behavior openly, not aloud, but within himself. The house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the moment when silence would no longer be enough. The moment Daniel chose to intervene did not arrive with anger or spectacle. It came quietly, during an ordinary morning that felt heavier than it should have. He observed Elena's tone toward Rita, measured, cruel, unnecessary, and something in him hardened. For the first time, he did not dismiss it as temperament or stress. He saw it clearly for what it was, abuse masked as authority. Daniel addressed it calmly, in front of others. His voice carried no raised volume, yet it commanded the room. He questioned Elena's behavior directly, not accusing, but firm. The staff froze, unused to seeing her authority challenged. Elena laughed it off at first, confident she could redirect him. But Daniel did not retreat. He made it clear that disrespect would no longer be tolerated in his home, by anyone. Rita stood silently as the balance shifted. She did not seek credit or validation. She only felt relief, mixed with fear of what might follow. Elena's eyes held fury now, not dominance. She had lost something she could not easily reclaim. And Daniel, standing there, realized he had allowed fear to rule his home for far too long, and that stopping it had changed him as much as it changed everything else. Elena did not retreat after Daniel's intervention. She recalculated. For someone like her, losing control publicly was not the end, it was an insult that demanded correction. She moved through the mansion with forced grace, smiling when necessary, but inside her mind sharpened with intent. If Rita was the crack in her world, then Rita would be removed. What Elena did not realize was that power built on fear collapses fastest when truth enters the room. Rita felt the pressure immediately. Elena's cruelty became quieter, more calculated, wrapped in politeness that felt more dangerous than open hostility. Tasks were reassigned, accusations implied rather than spoken. Elena began positioning herself as the wronged woman, subtly suggesting that Rita was manipulative, ambitious, and overstepping her role. Some staff grew uncertain, torn between old fear and new doubt. Rita endured it without protest, anchoring herself to honesty and restraint. She knew the truth she carried was heavier than any insult. The exposure came not through drama, but through inevitability. Daniel had already begun noticing inconsistencies, Elena's unexplained absences, Clinton's repeated appearances under vague excuses, the way conversations abruptly ended when he entered rooms. When confronted calmly, Elena overplayed her confidence. And when evidence surfaced, unavoidable, undeniable, her composure fractured. The lies she had built to secure power unraveled in seconds. Clinton did not fight the truth when cornered. His silence spoke louder than denial ever could. Elena's authority collapsed in front of the very people she had ruled through fear. The staff watched, stunned, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. Rita stood apart, not triumphant, but resolute. She had not exposed Elena out of revenge, but necessity. For Daniel, the revelation was devastating, but cleansing. The woman he had intended to marry was a stranger, and the home he had allowed to become a place of fear was now stripped bare. In that moment, he understood the cost of silence, the danger of ignoring discomfort, and the quiet strength of someone who chose truth even when it risked everything. The aftermath of Elena's fall did not bring instant peace. The mansion felt exposed, like a body after armor had been torn away. Conversations were cautious, movements unsure. People were no longer afraid, but they were uncertain, unused to a world where cruelty no longer dictated their behavior. Daniel understood that removing Elena was only the first step. What remained was the work of rebuilding trust. He met with the staff individually, not to interrogate, but to listen. It was the first time many of them had ever spoken freely within those walls. Stories surfaced, of fear, humiliation, silence endured for survival. Daniel listened without interruption, absorbing the consequences of his past indifference. He did not excuse himself. He accepted responsibility. And in doing so, something fundamental shifted. Authority began to feel human. Rita watched these changes from a distance. With Elena gone, she felt lighter, but also uncertain. Her role had never been to stay beyond necessity. She prepared herself quietly for departure, believing her presence had served its purpose. When Daniel noticed, he felt an unexpected urgency. He realized that in restoring order, he had come to value the person who had inspired it, not as a symbol, but as a woman with her own boundaries and dignity. Their conversation was honest and restrained. Daniel thanked Rita, not with grand gestures, but sincerity. Rita responded with humility, acknowledging that she had only done what felt right. In that exchange, something fragile but real settled between them, mutual respect, unburdened by fear or obligation. Daniel did not rush his feelings, but he did not deny them either. What he felt for Rita had grown slowly, through observation, trust, and shared silence. It was not passion born of proximity, but connection forged through character. He approached her not as an employer, but as a man willing to risk vulnerability. Rita struggled with the possibility at first. Her life had taught her to be cautious with hope. She questioned motives, power imbalances, and the weight of transformation. Daniel answered not with persuasion, but patience. He offered choice, not promises. Time passed, and in that time, Rita saw consistency. She saw a man unlearning control and choosing empathy. When Daniel proposed, it was private and simple, no audience, no spectacle. He did not ask her to forget who she had been. He honored it. Rita accepted not because of wealth or rescue, but because love had arrived without fear. The staff watched the transformation in quiet awe, not of status, but of fairness finally rewarded. Marriage did not erase the past, it redefined the future. Rita did not become invisible within luxury, she reshaped it. The mansion transformed into a home where laughter returned, where mistakes were corrected without cruelty, where people were valued beyond obedience. Rita's influence was never forceful, it was steady, intentional, and deeply human. Daniel changed too. He led differently, loved openly, and listened more than he commanded. His empire remained powerful, but it no longer thrived on fear. Together, they built a life that reflected growth, not dominance, proof that transformation was possible when courage met compassion. The story that began with fear ended with choice. And in the end, it was not power that changed everything, but a new maid who refused to be small in a world built on intimidation. As this story comes to an end, remember that behind every luxury lies a truth few ever see. If this story moved you, support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Until the next unforgettable true story, stay inspired and stay curious.